I pressed the remote, the garage door rose, and the empty space answered with a slap of cold air to my face. The Mustang fastback I'd saved up for over 6 years was gone. Next to me, a pawn ticket was pinned under a fridge magnet, my signature plastered across it. Silverware clinked at the dining table, and my parents looked at me as if everything was for family. The flight from Frankfurt to Denver had lasted more than 9 hours, leaving my whole body sore. But inside, I was still burning with elation. 6 grueling days of negotiations had ended with a European expansion deal for the company, the very pursuit my boss had chased for 2 years. I had just become the hero of the finance department, a 35-year-old woman who finally proved her worth after years of being dismissed in her own home. I'd imagined a perfect evening, swing by my parents' place in suburban Lakewood to pick up the Mustang stored in their garage, then drive straight to my downtown Denver apartment and reward myself with a glass of red wine. Everything seemed perfectly set until the garage door lifted. The cold emptiness stunned me. The familiar parking spot where I'd stored the Mustang to avoid city theft now showed only faint tire marks on the concrete. My heart lurched. I clenched the remote so hard my fingers went white. This couldn't be real. I had left the car here, driven it myself, locked the garage myself. That car wasn't just transportation, it was the crystallization of 6 years of bone-tired work, 6 years of skipped vacations, 6 years of hoarding every small bonus. It was also my memory of Grandpa, the man who first put a wrench in my hand and said, "Someday you'll have a car of your own." And now the garage was empty. I hurried into the kitchen, my heels pounding the wood floor like my own erratic heartbeat. My father, Robert, sat with his head down at the table. My mother, Elaine, turned a water glass in her hands while her eyes slid away. My sister, Crystal, looked oddly composed, salon-bright hair curtaining her shoulders, a defiant glint as if I were the one at fault for asking questions. No one spoke. No smile welcomed me home after a long trip, not even a "you're back." Only a silence heavy as stone. My eyes stopped at the paper pinned under the fridge magnet. I walked over, pulled it free, and felt as if a bucket of ice water had been poured down my spine. A pawn receipt, Riverside Pawn and Loan printed clearly, loan amount $45,000, term 35 days, my name signed at the bottom. But I know every stroke of my own signature. This one was fake, so sloppy, it even missed the final curl I always add. My breath snagged. I snapped my head toward the table. "Where's the car?" My voice came out rough, almost a growl. Crystal lifted her chin, propped it on her hand. "It's just temporary, Vanessa. I'll pay you back soon." I laughed, dry and brittle. Pay back what? And how? My father's jaw worked, but he still wouldn't meet my eyes. We had to make a hard decision. Crystal needed startup capital and you pawn my car? I was nearly shouting. My mother cut in, sugary sweet. "You make good money and it's stable. Crystal needs a chance. Family should help family." I stared straight at Crystal. "You used my spare key? And my title?" Crystal shrugged like it wasn't worth addressing. "I'll pay it back, with interest. Once my beauty brand launches." My head rang. Memories crashed in. At 16, I worked concessions at a movie theater to save for college applications while Crystal got a lavish Sweet 16. At my college graduation, my parents claimed a canceled flight, yet the next day showed up at Crystal's ballet performance. Christmas of 2018, Crystal got a brand new Volkswagen with a red bow, while I hugged a cheap sweater. I'd gotten used to being overlooked, but I never thought they'd touch the one thing I saw as my symbol. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification from the insurance company. A lien had been placed on the car, meaning the loan was officially recorded. Cold spread through me. This wasn't just about money. It was a brazen denial of ownership, a betrayal written in bloodlines. I drew a deep breath, folded the receipt, and slid it into my bag. 30 days, I said, my voice oddly even. 30 days to get the car back, or I go to the police. Forgery, Theft, everything's documented. Don't think I won't. My mother gaped. You'd press charges against your own parents? I turned, hand on the doorknob. Family doesn't steal each other's dreams. The door slammed behind me. I heard plates rattle, as if the house itself trembled under the weight of my long-stored fury. I stepped into the yard, the Denver afternoon wind threaded through my hair, but inside me was only a cold resolve, this time. I wouldn't back down. I would take back the Mustang. I would take back the respect they'd tossed away. And maybe I would take back myself. I drove straight to Riverside Pawn and Loan on Colfax Avenue. The neon signs flickered, the mix of cleanser and cheap air freshener burned my throat. I tightened my grip on my bag and walked to the glass counter. A middle-aged man wearing a name tag that read, Gordon, looked up, eyes steady with the neutrality of someone used to watching people trade dreams for cash. I need information on a black Mustang fastback titled to Vanessa Hart, I said, setting down my driver's license and a copy of the title, Gordon typed. Brought in 5 days ago, he said. Loan for $45,000, $3,000 in fees, total $48,000 due in 35 days. After that we auction. Who signed for me? I asked. Gordon slid the file across. At the bottom, Vanessa Hart lay neatly, close to real but missing the tail curl I always write. I set my license and a contract with my real signature beside it. Compare, he leaned in, silent. I'll get the manager, he murmured. Manager Ramirez appeared, collar buttoned to the top. He reviewed the file, then scrubbed through security footage by timestamp. The screen showed 2 figures, a man about my father's age and a woman with light hair and oversized glasses. I didn't need sound to recognize Crystal's tight-lipped fidget. Ramirez printed an instruction sheet. We can provide a copy if there's a formal request, he said. And if you believe the signature's forged, you should file a report. Is there a way to hold the car? I asked. We can pause the auction only with a $15,000 deposit, Ramirez said. The balance must be paid before the deadline. We follow the law. I photographed everything and uploaded it to the cloud. Out in the lot, I sat in my rental sedan and opened my laptop. A new folder. Mustang fraud. I emailed Dana Brooks, an attorney who'd advised one of our partners. Dana. Urgent guidance needed on signature forgery and unauthorized use of property. I attached photos and Ramirez's number. While waiting, I scheduled an online appointment with the police department to log the incident. I didn't want this to become a lawsuit, but this time I needed the law at my shoulder. The reply came almost instantly. Stay calm, Dana wrote. 3 actions. Don't touch the originals. Build a timeline and proof of your location at the time of the transaction. Consider posting the deposit to hold the car. Then choose civil or criminal depending on developments. Document everything. I leaned back and watched sunlight smear across the street. A kid pedaled past on a bike. The weightless ease pinched my chest. The last time I felt that light was at 12, when Grandpa taught me to hear an engine's rhythm. I started the car. Next step. Go home. Verify. Gather the shards of evidence from memory. The Lakewood house was quiet. I took over the dining table, spread ledgers, printed receipts. I pulled a plastic bin from the living room cabinet where Mom kept the albums. Glossy pages reflected the afternoon and drew old dates forward. Crystal's Sweet 16, string lights in the yard, a 3-tier cake. My page held a slip-shift missed for AP exam. The back cover showed that year's Christmas. Crystal leaned against a red-bowed Volkswagen. I hugged a sweater. The pictures didn't speak, but they were loud enough. The favored one wasn't me. The back door clicked. Dad stepped in, hands dusty with sawdust, the smell of gasoline trailing into the kitchen. He froze, seeing me with the album. Why dig up the past? He rasped. I closed it and met his eyes. To remember today isn't an accident, it's a straight line. He braced a hand on a chair, eyes tired at the edges. I was wrong, he said softly. The admission hit the table like a small coin that still made ripples. My phone lit up. Uncle Marcus calling. I stepped onto the porch. Wind sifted through the elms, leaves whispering. Elaine told me, he said, if you want to let it go, I won't stop you, but if you've drawn a line, follow it through. No one learns when you erase the line. I gripped the railing. I'll post the deposit to hold the car, then decide. He paused. If you come up short, call me. Every dollar needs a paper trail. Back in the kitchen, Mom was wiping the sink, eyes darting and dodging. Are you really going to do this, Vanessa? She whispered. I nodded. I won't file today if everyone does their part, but the 30-day deadline doesn't move. Her lips thinned. I knew she feared embarrassment more than being wrong. Once, that softened me, not this time. That night, I loaded documents into a shared folder, gave access to my parents, Crystal, and Uncle Marcus. I built a day-by-day tracker, color-coded. Each payment, each appointment. I drafted a thank you email to Ramirez for the camera review and confirmed the extraction request would come through my attorney. Before shutting the laptop, I set a morning reminder, call the credit union about deposit requirements, same-day wire fees, and the wire process. Denver's night was dry and cold. I went back to my apartment. The living room held a faint pine smell. I leaned on the window frame and watched the I-25 glow like a silver stream. Somewhere, my Mustang sat locked in a pawn warehouse, quiet as a tethered animal. I laid my hand on my chest and felt my heartbeat slow. The rage gave way to something heavier, a resolve thickened with the sharp edges of law and numbers. Before sleep, I scribbled a note. Day 1. Shore up evidence. Hold the car. No useless arguments. I tucked it into my wallet. For the first time since seeing the empty garage, my eyelids consented to close. In the morning, I'd begin the hardest work, turning pain into a plan into signatures, and signatures into a key that fits the lock it belongs to. The next morning, I texted Crystal, Bean and Bloom at noon, bring everything. I arrived early, ordered a cappuccino, and watched foot traffic along the Lakewood Strip. Crystal came in with light makeup and dimmer eyes. Show me. She laid down a stack, color mood boards, product name lists, a few packaging sketches, a handwritten expense sheet missing a revenue column. I flipped quickly, my pen tapping. Suppliers? Tested formulas? Shipping contracts? Inventory? Refund costs? Sales channels? Return rate? 6-month cash flow? I plan to launch and iterate. Small brands are agile. I set down the pen. Agile isn't blind. You staked someone else's asset on something you can't even name. I opened my laptop, built a 3-column sheet. Costs, risks, remedies. At minimum, ingredient contracts, safety certifications, product liability insurance, and a refund cushion. Crystal bit her lip. The first batch arrived. Lots of cracked bottles, formulas separating, customers want refunds. I looked up. Do you have receiving logs, defect photos, retention samples? She nodded. I wrote big. 1. Stop shipping. 2. Contact supplier. File incident. 3. Announce time-boxed exchanges divided by refunds. 4. Freeze ads. I slid the paper over. And no more borrowing from anyone. She looked at me, eyes red. Lend me a little, just to get through this week. No. The word dropped like a pebble into water. You've heard all your life that I'm stable and responsible, she whispered, but you've never seen the price of responsibility. You will. The clock is ticking. We need $15,000 to hold the car. The rest must be paid on time. You earn it and pay for this lesson yourself. I handed over a template. Every night at 9 p.m., send a report, refund count, dollar total, and progress on those 4 items. She nodded, dark crescents under her eyes. Leaving the cafe, I stopped by the credit union on Sheridan Avenue to ask about same-day wires. The teller highlighted the fee items, I snapped a photo and saved it to the Mustang fraud folder. Dana's email arrived. A short checklist: communicate in writing, build the timeline, consider the deposit, then pursue civil action. I replied, understood. In the quiet of the afternoon, I opened a shared sheet. Repayment plan Vanessa, with columns for responsible party, funding source, due date, proof, status. For myself, cash plus bonus, due week 2. Dad, night shift differential, due weeks 2 to 3. Mom, sell heirlooms, due weeks 1 to 2. Crystal, Macy's paycheck plus consignment, due weekly. I turned on change tracking and shared it with everyone and Uncle Marcus. At 5:30, Caldwell texted, Frankfurt update looks good. Keep your cadence. Don't let family flood the levee you're building. I understood. Discipline is the embankment. At 7, the doorbell rang. Dad stood there, ball cap in hand. I brought copies of the differential statements. First payout is next week. He glanced around, voice slow. When you bought the Mustang, I thought a car is just a car. Now, I get it, it was how you told yourself you're worthy. He set the papers on the table. I'm sorry I twisted that. I nodded. 19 days left, I said. I'll post the deposit. The rest, everyone sticks to the plan. He left. I reviewed the sheet. Crystal's text popped in, photos of cracked bottles, video of separation, screenshots of refund demands. Morning shift tomorrow. Reports at 9 p.m. Nightly, I replied, received. Do the 4 items. No ad hoc promos. I forwarded everything to Dana and asked her to draft a state-compliant notice of cure. I reviewed my funding sources, a portion of newly vested stock awards, tax reserves, and my emergency fund. I set a floor of 3 months of living expenses and marked in red, do not withdraw below the floor. The email contact Ramirez arrived. Dana would send a formal request for camera extraction and told me to complete the timeline, proving I was in Frankfurt at the time of the transaction. I opened my meeting calendar, pinned my plane tickets, hotel invoices, photos of the conference room, and a scan of my entry-exit stamp. The timeline appeared as clear as painted lane lines. I brewed black tea. On the table, the travel spare key to the Mustang lay on top of the file stack. I remembered Grandpa's advice, metal and paint are only the shell. Inside is the promise you sign with yourself. I had signed with 6 years of labor. Today, I signed the addendum, preservation. Before shutting down, I typed 3 bold lines. Goals: keep the car, repay, don't break work cadence. Principles: everything in writing, money with receipts, limits, no payday loans, no negotiating after the deadline. I sent the link to my parents and Uncle Marcus and asked for read receipts. Denver's night was dry and cold. I leaned against the window frame, watching the ribbon of I-25 glide by like a silver stream. Somewhere, my Mustang sat locked up, waiting to come home. I placed a hand on my chest and felt my heartbeat slow like an engine at idle. In the morning, I would call Ramirez to confirm the extraction request, book a wire appointment with the credit union, and send Crystal the cure notice template. 3 tasks, 3 anchors, so the boat called Respect wouldn't capsize mid-river. I closed the curtains, kept a pocket of silence just big enough to feel my hands on the wheel. I inhaled deeply, steadier. A text from Mom landed around noon. Come home for dinner. The whole family needs to talk. I checked my calendar and replied, I'll come, but we speak in plans and documents. Before leaving the office, I printed the entire packet, copies of the title, excerpts of the forgery statutes, the pawn shop's deposit instructions, and the obligation timeline. I clipped them into a black binder and labeled it, Rules. Denver's afternoon was dry and windy. I arrived 15 minutes early. The Lakewood kitchen smelled like grilled meat. Dad sat at the head of the table. Mom set the silverware. Crystal came last. I placed the binder on the wood table and popped the clasp. Tonight I'm not arguing. I'm laying down rules, I said evenly. I slid out each packet. This is the title, this is the statute, this is the penalty framework, these are the deposit instructions, this is the schedule. I nodded toward the door. And this is our witness. Uncle Marcus stepped in and sat beside me. I'm here so the family rope doesn't fray any further, he said. I wrote on the minutes. Date, time, attendees, objectives. I'll start, I said. Using the spare key. And the title without authorization, plus a forged signature, is a crime. The pawn shop confirms there's video. The attorney is requesting extraction. I pointed to the underlined penalties. If we miss the deadline, I file. If everything's repaid before the deadline, I choose civil with a contract that has teeth. Dad squeezed his water glass. Do we have to be this harsh? His voice was rough. I met his eyes. The only language left that works is the law. Verbal promises have failed. Mom dabbed her eyes. Crystal looked down. I pulled the schedule closer. Here are the milestones, I said. I've posted the deposit to hold the car. The balance must be paid before the deadline. I wrote on a blank sheet. This week's obligations. Dad confirms night shift and differential. Mom lists assets to liquidate. Crystal locks her work schedule, itemizes consumer debts, and provides the installment contracts for items already sold. I pressed the pen tip. Transfer receipts go in the shared folder. 1 day late triggers the stated penalty. Mom whispered, "Is there any way to keep outsiders from finding out?" I answered, "We keep it in-house if everyone respects the rules. If not, the court will know." Dad looked up, not dodging this time. "I'll work nights. When I get paid, I'll transfer it right away." He turned to Crystal. "And your share?" Crystal opened a small notebook. I picked up fixed shifts, sold 2 bags and a pair of shoes. This week totals 1,200. Next week depends on my paycheck. I nodded and noted it down. I also need a full debt schedule. We plan to the minimum so nothing snaps, I said. She hesitated, then nodded. I opened the risk scenarios page. If the HELOC is delayed further, we have 3 options: defer non-essential expenses, sell more, or request an extension with proof of deposit. But remember, a cash buyer can show up anytime. The oven ticked, and if anyone misses a commitment, I said slowly, I file the next day. No delays. Dad set down his fork, his back slightly bent. "I'm sorry." Mom laid her hand over his. "We were wrong," she said, "but I hope you won't put your parents in jail," I replied. "I don't want anyone in jail. I want discipline and respect. The civil path stays open if everyone walks it straight." I slid out a 1-page pledge. Each person signs and notes this week's amount, next week's, and the final deadline. Uncle Marcus placed a pen in the center. Sign like breathing slow, steady, intentional. Dad signed first, sweat beaded his brow. Mom signed next, her hand unsteady. Crystal held the pen the longest. She inhaled and signed. I clipped the papers back into the binder. "Don't call this helping each other. The right name is returning what's owed," I said, looking at Crystal. "And we're learning." She nodded without protest. Every night at 9 p.m., report using the template. If you need a customer cure, notice drafted, tell me. Don't promise beyond your means. Dinner was served. Mom ladled soup, set Dad's plate, then mine and Crystal's. I ate slowly, letting the rhythm of chewing cool the heat inside. No one revisited the past or mentioned Frankfurt. Tonight was only about schedules and signatures. After dishes, I pulled out a roll of tape and added a label to the binder. Evidence. Mom watched and smiled. "You love labeling," I said. "Labels keep people in their right places." Dad asked how to use the shared folder again. I printed a how to upload receipts sheet and set it by the landline. My phone buzzed. Crystal reported she'd scheduled postal returns. I replied with a thumbs up and added, "Don't confuse politeness with weakness." She texted back, I understand. On the porch, the wind carried pine and smoke. Uncle Marcus walked me to the gate. You did well, he said. You changed the family's language from pleading to principles. I smiled slightly. I only translated the truth. He looked at the house. From now on, they'll have to learn your language. I got in the car, turned on the headlights, and checked the binder. Those papers weren't as beautiful as the Mustang, but tonight they were the engine I needed. I texted the family group, signed. Schedule stands. Good night. Then I drove into the dark, letting my taillights draw a red exclamation point at the end of the day, closing out undisciplined love and opening a way of being together with boundaries. At first, light brushing the brick row houses outside my window, I powered up, logged into my brokerage, and sold a portion of newly vested stock awards, keeping my 3-month emergency fund intact. The order-filled box popped up cold and clean. I saved the trade ID, took screenshots, and filed them in the Mustang fraud folder. $15,000 to buy time to hold the car. At 8 a.m., I called Ramirez. I'm sending the deposit today. What's the process? He recited, same-day wire, before 11:30 a.m. Email the receipt, shop updates status within an hour. I repeated each step, then called the credit union to book an in-branch appointment. Before heading out, I glanced at the note on my fridge. Hold the car, repay, don't break work cadence. Colfax was busy in the morning. I grabbed a turkey club, stuffed it in my bag as a reminder to eat on time. The black binder sat in the passenger seat. At the credit union, I filled out the form, verified my information, and signed slowly. At least this signature was mine. Caldwell texted, keep the Frankfurt cadence. If you need 2 days, tell me. I replied, still on time. Thanks. Crystal also texted, my shift is from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. I'll send my report tonight. I answered, use the template. Don't ask for more money. At 11:17 a.m., the wire succeeded. I sent the receipt to Ramirez, CC'd Dana and Uncle Marcus. 20 minutes later, hold status, updated. Auction paused. My chest loosened. I set a 9 p.m. alarm for Crystal's report and another for the next payment milestone. In the afternoon, I returned to the office. No one asked about family, everyone was buried in spreadsheets. I adjusted Q2 cash flows for the Frankfurt project, glancing now and then at Caldwell's check marks appearing on our list. In my head, Grandpa's voice, engines need clean oil, people need discipline. I kept rhythm, do, log, save, confirm. At 5 p.m., I stopped by Lakewood. Dad wore his night shift uniform, steel-toe boots by the door. He handed me an envelope, confirmation of new shifts, estimated differential, pay date. I'll transfer as promised, he said. I answered, note Mustang repayment on the transfer and send a photo of the receipt. He nodded, the corners of his mouth tightening like he wanted to say more but didn't. Mom brought a tray of tea. The hollow at her neck showed where her old keepsake necklace used to sit. She said softly, I pawned the jewelry. No one forced me. I'm taking responsibility. I asked for the receipt and clipped it into the binder, another brick on the bridge we were building. Her eyes were unsettled but resolute. For the first time, responsibility sat plainly on my mother's shoulders. Crystal came home late, sweat still damp at her temples. She unclipped her Macy's badge and opened her phone. Day 1 report, shipping paused, supplier contacted, cure notice drafted, ads turned off, 17 refunds, total 1,035. I marked it complete and said, tomorrow add photos of the exchange logs, with date, time, and the receiver's name. She nodded, voice hoarse. 8 hours on my feet, my legs are on fire. Now I get why you always say don't spend future money. Dinner was simple: salad, chicken soup, toasted bread. No one rehashed the past. We ate slowly, as if learning how to chew a hard truth. While we wash dishes, Mom said. If the neighbors ask about the necklace, I'll say I'm getting the class prepared. I looked at her thinner face. You don't owe anyone an explanation, I said. We only owe each other the truth. Back at my apartment, I opened the progress sheet. Dad's row flipped from yellow to pale green. Night shift confirmed. Mom's row red in sale. Crystal's row had a first report. I added a reminder. Track quarterly bonus, don't exceed risk threshold. I knew the boundary of money was like the boundary of kindness. Draw it once, keep it daily. At 9 p.m., Crystal sent more photos of cracked bottles, a video of separating formulas, and screenshots of negative comments. I trimmed an overly apologetic sentence in her response template and sent it back. Stay calm and transparent, I texted. Don't promise beyond this week's cash flow. She replied, understood. At 10 p.m., Ramirez sent a system confirmation. Hold active, no auction date. Dry words, but enough for tonight. I shut my laptop and leaned back. On the shelf, a small Mustang model caught a streak of light. I touched it, as if re-signing a promise to myself. The car will come home, but more importantly, respect will. My phone lit up. Caldwell sent the next morning Zoom and added, don't let self-respect turn into self-immolation. I smiled. I'm watering, not burning. On the table, the black binder lay square. Plain sheets had become the engine pushing each day back into the right lane. Before bed, I stuck a countdown grid on the fridge. After today, 18 days remained. I drew each box in red and wrote at the top, 1 task per day. Next to it, a don'ts list. No payday loans, no insults, no self-blame. At the bottom, I copied Grandpa's line, mountain. Passes aren't scary. Shaky hands on the wheel are. My reflection in the glass showed a woman tired but clear-eyed. I knew the price wouldn't be cheap, but it was buying the right thing, time to reassemble trust. Night closed over the frame. I locked the door, set my phone on the charger, and felt as calm as fresh asphalt after rain. Tomorrow I'd check the hold status, nudge my parents for receipts, read Crystal's report, and return to the Frankfurt spreadsheets. In bed, I counted softly, 1, 2, 3, like turning a key. In the dark, I heard the steady hum of something invisible, discipline, idling warm at my core. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual, brewed black tea, and opened the progress grid on the fridge. The hold deposit square had gone green, but the rest were as yellow as warning lights. I noted, track HELOC, call the credit union, review Crystal's report, confirm Dad's night differential. 18 days to go. At 8:30 a.m., Dad called me to Lakewood to look at papers. On the dining table lay a spread of opened envelopes, thin paper and dense printing. Mom stood nearby, hands smelling of dish soap. Dad slid the stack toward me. On top were Crystal's credit card statements. Underneath were buy now, pay later plans and 3 high-interest personal loans. I flipped through each, my heart sinking with every number. Altogether, nearly 80,000. The air in the kitchen thickened. Mom murmured, "We didn't know." She hid it. I looked at the clustered due dates, late fees, and compounding interest. I pulled out a chair and set down my pen. No more surprises. Build a master list. I created 4 columns: creditor, balance, rate, due date. Dad read numbers, Mom wrote. I added a priority column and marked in red the ones most likely to sue. I called Uncle Marcus and asked him to stop by. When he arrived, I handed him the sheet. He scanned it and nodded. No more hiding. From now on, everything in the open. He pulled out a calculator and ran per diem interest. The figures buzzed like a swarm. If we don't clamp down, he said, money meant for the Mustang will get sucked into other holes. I said, then shut the valves. In the afternoon, we went to the credit union to meet Mr. Winters, my parents' financial advisor. Low ceiling, warm lights. He reviewed the sheet and flipped to the pending HELOC. If this funds, he said slowly, you'll delay retirement by at least 5 years. And that assumes no new debt. Mom tightened her grip. Dad stared out the window, silent. I asked for options, Mr. Winters recommended 3 steps: pause all non-essential spending, negotiate hardship extensions with creditors, open a dedicated account for Mustang repayment so the money doesn't get mixed. I asked him to print the bucket guide and a hardship letter template. He nodded. On the way home, Mom asked, "Are you angry with me?" I looked at her dry hands, cracked at the knuckles. "I'm angry you let secrecy become normal," I said. "But anger doesn't pay debt. Sunlight and discipline do." That evening, Crystal stopped by, drained after a standing shift. I handed her the debt sheet. Her hands shook. "Starting today," I said, "everything goes in the ledger. Not one new dollar of debt. Each week, send photos of statements." She nodded. "I'm scared." "Good. Fear keeps you awake," I said. I opened the plan file and added, "Lock the credit cards, close the BNPL wallet, use only a debit card for essentials." At 9 p.m., she sent the daily report, refund count, photos of the logs, supplier responses. An email asked for more time. I drafted a reply template and warned her not to promise beyond this week's cash on hand. I forwarded it to Dana to review the wording. That night, I typed a memo to the whole family. "If the money doesn't hit on schedule, I'll file criminal charges. This doesn't change." I wasn't threatening. I was restating the law everyone had signed. Done. I closed the laptop and looked out the window. The lights on I-25 still flowed. In my head were color boxes: green for complete, yellow for in progress, red for late. I wanted everyone to see those colors as clearly as traffic signals. Over the next 2 days, we ran like an emergency job site. Dad worked nights, collar damp with sweat, snapping a photo of each transfer receipt into the shared folder. Mom called old shops for buyback quotes, then took keepsakes to the pawn shop. She didn't cry, only told me to record "sold" in the ledger. Crystal woke earlier, learned how to tape her feet, hydrated, and sent her report on time every night. Refunds slowed. The supplier agreed to replace part of the bad batch. One morning, the credit union said the HELOC needed more appraisal. 3 more days. My throat burned. Time wasn't a luxury. I wrote, Plan B: sell more, defer a secondary bill, call Uncle Marcus for a backup path. He answered bluntly, "If needed, I'll front it, but every transfer must say, family loan purpose, Mustang repayment." That evening, Dad sat on the porch, eyes red from lack of sleep. "I thought a car was just metal," he said. "Now I know it's a diploma you awarded yourself." I sat beside him in silence. The Lakewood night wind carried a faraway train. "You don't need to say much," I said. "Just transfer on schedule." He nodded, like setting down a heavy sack with a name. Near midnight, Dana reported the camera extraction letter was sent. The pawn shop confirmed they'd prepare it. She attached a draft civil agreement with teeth, schedule, interest, late penalties. I read it and circled spots to tighten. I wanted every detour closed. Before bed, I added a line to the board: "Boundary doesn't move, miss the deadline file, no exceptions." I stuck a note for myself: "Keep work. Cadence. Frankfurt is still my project." Next to it was a photo of the Mustang on Loveland Pass, black paint catching sun like silk. I touched the photo and breathed deep. Beneath metal, there isn't only engine and gas. There's also the promise I signed with myself, and I won't let anyone erase it. Thursday morning, I was reviewing the Frankfurt report when an email from Riverside Pawn flashed: "Cash buyer interested in the Mustang. First funds win." I called Ramirez immediately. He confirmed the buyer could close in 2 days. "Your hold window is still open," he said, "but we can't refuse cash if you don't pay in full before the deadline." I looked at the countdown on my fridge, 16 days to the final due date, but the real race was only 48 hours. The HELOC still hung. I opened the tracker and typed 48-hour plan, verify cash on hand, call the credit union about same-day wire, sweep backup sources, plug leaks. I texted the family group. Emergency mode. Cash buyer appeared. Dad called first. I can get an advance from my shift lead for $2,000 and I'll cover it with next week's paycheck. I thanked him and told him to label the transfer Mustang repayment. Mom texted next. I sold Grandma's silver candlesticks. Low price, but cash today. Crystal sent photos of a handbag and lightly used heels. I'm taking them on consignment, asking for quick payout. I entered each item in the sheet. The committed column turned greener. At 10 a.m., I reached the credit union. The teller said, "We can process a wire before 11:45 a.m." I filled the form and left the final amount blank. I texted Ramirez, "Keep the line open. I'll update each milestone." At noon, I stopped in Lakewood. Dad handed me a photo of the advance transfer receipt. Mom set an empty velvet box in front of me. "These pieces saw me through many ceremonies," she said. "Now they'll bring your car home." I clipped the receipt into the black binder. No room for pretty words, only documents. My phone buzzed. Crystal said the consignment shop offered less because of scuffs. "Any faster option?" I asked. She sighed, "No." "Then take it. Today's cash beats tomorrow's price." For the first time, Crystal listened without hunting for a workaround. At 1 p.m., an email from the credit union. The HELOC needed more house photos, appraisal pushed to the weekend. 3 days was too far. I opened Plan B, defer non-essentials, tap my emergency credit line, if still short, ask Uncle Marcus to bridge with terms as tight as Dad's and Crystal's. I called Uncle. He said, "Okay. But in a separate agreement. The language must have teeth." I said, "I don't know how to write without teeth anymore." He chuckled hoarsely. "Good. Without teeth, people chew you." At 2 p.m., we were short exactly $3,000. I typed, "Final gap." Caldwell texted, "Don't let home pressure wreck Frankfurt." I replied, "Almost at shore." I messaged Crystal, "Anything else to sell today?" She sent photos of silk scarves and fashion rings. "The rings won't bring much," she said. "The red dress." I cut in, "Keep what you need for work. Sell the rest." Just before 3 p.m., Uncle Marcus arrived at the bank and signed a check exactly per the template. I handed him a short pledge: family loan, purpose, redeem the Mustang, repay on schedule, penalty if late. He read carefully, then signed. We snapped photos and saved them to the folder. I called the credit union. "We're ready." The teller said, "Say when, and I'll hit the button." At 11:35 a.m., the bank's glass reflected tired but steady faces. Dad stood on my right. Mom took a plastic chair. Crystal clutched a paper bag. Uncle Marcus folded his arms. I looked at them and saw a different version of our family. Fewer empty promises, more real. "Numbers, go," I said. The teller keyed the wire. I emailed Ramirez. "Wire in flight." The minute hand slid past the 40 mark. My hands were cold. Mom murmured a prayer. Dad stared at the floor. Crystal gripped her bag until it wrinkled. I watched only the processing light. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Finally, the screen blinked. Completed. My phone buzzed. Ramirez, funds received. Status, paid in full on hold. We won't sell to the cash buyer. I exhaled, like easing the car down after a steep pass. We didn't cheer. I leaned against the cool glass, letting my body register the narrow road we'd cleared. Mom brushed my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. Dad said nothing but stood straighter, as if shedding a sandbag. Night wind slapped the lot's windows, thin and cold. Inside my chest, the taut rope slowly unwound, very slowly. That evening, I sent an email to confirm the pickup appointment. Ramirez replied, "Tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. I printed a checklist. Originals, wire receipt, Pre-pawn photos, Vin. I added a line, stay silent when emotions want to burst. Back at my apartment, I opened the tracker. The redemption funds column turned deep green. Next to it, many squares still yellow, civil contract, payment schedule, security devices. I marked day 0 of the next phase. Caldwell texted, Zoom at 11 a.m. tomorrow. Celebrate later, I replied. I'll celebrate when the engine turns over. Before sleep, I stood at the window. Above, I-25 flowed like silver thread. The past 2 days felt like surgery without anesthesia. No gray zones, just sharp blades and stitches. I set a hand on my chest and listened to my heart settle. Tomorrow I'd touch the wheel again. But the more important thing happened today. We learned to run toward the same finish line, not away from each other. And for the first time, I believed the Mustang would return to the garage not thanks to luck, but to discipline and numbers that finally stood on my side. The next morning, I arrived at Riverside Pond and lone ahead of schedule. The start of day air smelled like cleanser over metal, the buzzing fluorescence thrummed like a stretched nerve. Ramirez appeared at exactly 8:30 a.m. Crisp shirt, the wary focus of a man who works at the seam between law and appetite. He set a file on the counter and handed me a pen. Sign where marked. Then we'll release the car. I nodded, touching the pen the way you touch a latch newly oiled. I signed each stroke of my name, steadying my hand. It felt strange, like writing over the shadow of the forged signature that had haunted me for nights. Verify the VIN, Ramirez said, sliding over a printout of the alphanumerics. I matched it to the photos from before the car was taken. It matched. He rang a bell. A buzz-cut kid brought a ring of keys. The Mustang key sat in the middle, black and glossy, heavy like a piece of memory cast in metal. We washed and charged it last night, Ramirez said. Policy before return. I took the key, fingertips tingling from cold and emotion. We walked to the back lot. Under the awning, my fastback rested, black paint catching sun into a band of steel. I laid a hand on the hood, cool and smooth, like the first day at the dealer. Sorry for the inconvenience, Ramirez said quietly. I gave a short reply. I didn't want to open another door of conversation here. I turned the key. The first cough roughened, then smoothed. I sat a moment to let the sound pass through me, a small rite of cleansing. I shifted and rolled out. In the rear view, the neon receded and vanished. Triumph came with a bitter aftertaste, like overstrong coffee. The car was back, but the part of me that once felt safe had been breached by familiar hands. I didn't cheer, just held the wheel and reminded myself, today is the midpoint, not the finish line. In the garage under my building, I photographed all 4 corners and noted the condition. I locked the papers in the safe and hid the spare key somewhere new. I booked an immobilizer and steering lock and called insurance to update the file. The agent asked, "Any change in parking location?" I said, "Yes. Now only I have the code and key." A simple answer, but it felt like pounding in a new mile marker. That afternoon, I joined the Frankfurt Zoom. Caldwell glimpsed the Mustang's reflection by the window. "Is it back?" he asked. I nodded. "Keep the cadence," he said. "When home is steady, we'll talk about growing the team." I thanked him, ended the call, and sat still. In my head, pen strokes on paper clean and final replaced the weeks of noise. 3 days later, Mom texted, "Sunday dinner. Your father's grilling. Come?" I waited and replied, "I'll be there." I brought the black binder and a draft repayment agreement. I wanted to lay an eraser beside the pen so, if someone tried to rewrite, the ink would be new. The table was familiar. Blue cloth, hand-painted dishes saved for rare days. The smells of grilled meat, mashed potatoes, and melting butter warmed the kitchen enough to soften anyone. Dad set a plate before me, wrist still smudged from night shifts. Crystal arrived late, hair tied back, neck bare. I spoke before conversation could drift to safe shores, The car is back. Thank you for doing your parts. But we're not done. I opened the binder and slid the draft to the center. This is a civil agreement with interest and late penalties. Without it, I file criminal charges. I didn't need to raise my voice. The words had their own weight. Dad held my gaze longer than usual. I'll sign, he said, but let me read it all. He read slowly, finger underlining a few lines. Mom clasped her hands, didn't interrupt, occasionally glancing at Crystal like she wanted to ask but didn't dare. Crystal swallowed. I'll sign, she said softly. And I'll pay on time. I nodded. If you need an extension, ask 7 days in advance. Everything in writing. We ate in a silence that fit. I gave a short update on Frankfurt. Dad asked a couple of questions about rates. Mom mentioned the neighbor switching electricity plans. Tiny stories drifted across the table like pebbles hitting a shallow pond, no splashy drama, just ripples that eased the surface. After dinner, Mom pulled me to the sink. If you're angry at me, say it, she said. I can take it. I don't need anger to hold a boundary, I answered. She paused, then nodded, eyes glossy but dry. I realized she was growing a new habit, asking before touching. I walked past the garage. Dad flipped the light and showed me the newly sorted tool rack. I'm planning a locked partition, he said. Only you know the code, whenever you want it. I looked at the car idling quiet, its body reflecting 4 people standing still. I thanked him, softly, afraid to crack the fragile thing we'd just reached. Before leaving, I gathered the marked-up draft. Dad said, we sign on Thursday with Uncle Marcus and the lawyer. I agreed. Crystal slipped a small note into my pocket, her week-by-week plan modest amounts but steady. I'll send it every Sunday night, she said. If I'm short or on target, I'll say so. On-time reporting is halfway there, I said. That night, I drove the Mustang along Sloan's Lake. The city breathed evenly. Wind threaded the window, the engine hummed like a whisper about patience. I thought of the sprint we'd run, of the squares turning green. Victory tastes bitter, yes, but bitterness is clarifying. If it were sweet, I might have believed things would heal on their own. Back at my apartment, I locked the car and let my hand rest on the wheel. Home, I said softly, like soothing a child after a fever. In the mirror, I wasn't a people pleaser anymore. I was the steward of an asset called respect. I cut the engine and heard the click, like a period at the end of a long sentence. Tomorrow would bring the final formalities, signatures, interest lines, due dates. But tonight, I let myself linger 1 more minute in the quiet and the faint smell of gasoline to remember that some things only return when you grip the wheel tightly, clearly, as if you never let go. The following Thursday morning, I walked into Dana Brooks's office with a black binder. The glass door reflected a version of me less foggy, straight-backed, clear-eyed, hand holding the fountain pen Grandpa gave me. Dana stood to shake my hand. Fresh roast coffee scented the room. Tell me everything from the beginning, but leave your feelings at the door, she said. I laid out the wire receipt, the paid in full on hold confirmation, title photos, printed emails from Ramirez, and the Frankfurt timeline, everything fanned across the desk, like cards laid in order. Dana turned each page, her brown ink pen tracking with a sharp gaze. We have 2 paths, she concluded. Criminal, forged signature, unauthorized use of property. Civil, repayment agreement with teeth, interest, penalties, and enforcement. Both are valid. The difference is emotional cost and time. I looked toward the window where sunlight slid along the blue trim, then drew a breath. I want the law on my side, but I don't want to destroy my family. Civil, on the condition everything is tightly bound. I'm scared. Good. Fear keeps you awake, I said. I opened the plan file and added, lock the credit cards, close the BNPL wallet, use only a debit card for essentials. At 9 p.m., she sent the daily report, refund count, photos of the logs, supplier responses. There was an email asking for more time. I drafted a reply template and told her not to promise beyond this week's cash on hand. I forwarded it to Dana to review the wording. That night, I typed a memo to the whole family. If the money doesn't land on schedule, I will file criminal charges. This does not change. I wasn't threatening. I was restating the law everyone had signed. Done. I closed the laptop and looked out the window. The lights on I-25 still flowed, and in my head were color boxes: green for complete, yellow for in progress, red for late. I wanted the whole family to see those colors as clearly as traffic lights. Over the next 2 days, we ran like an emergency job site. Dad worked nights, collar damp with sweat, snapping a photo of each transfer receipt into the shared folder. Mom called old shops for buyback quotes, then took keepsakes to the pawn shop. She didn't cry, only told me to record "sold" in the ledger. Crystal woke earlier, learned how to tape her feet, drank water, and sent her report on time every night. Refund count slowed. The supplier agreed to replace part of the defective batch. One morning, the credit union said the HELOC needed more appraisal. 3 more days. My throat burned. Time wasn't generous. I wrote Plan B: sell more, defer a secondary bill, call Uncle Marcus for a backup lane. He answered briefly, "If needed, I'll front it, but every transfer must read: family loan purpose, Mustang repayment." That evening, Dad sat on the porch, eyes red from lack of sleep. "I thought a car was just metal," he said. "Now I know it's a diploma you awarded yourself." I was quiet, sitting beside him. The Lakewood night wind carried the sound of a distant train. I said, "You don't need to say much. Just transfer on schedule." He nodded, as if setting down a burden with a name. Near midnight, Dana reported the camera extraction letter had been sent. The pawn shop confirmed they would prepare it. She attached a draft civil agreement with teeth, repayment schedule, interest, late penalties. I read it and marked in red the spots to tighten. I wanted every detour locked. Before bed, I added a line on the board: "Boundary doesn't move, miss the deadline file, no exceptions." I stuck a note for myself: "Keep work cadence. Frankfurt is still my project." Next to it was a photo of the Mustang on Loveland Pass, black paint catching the sun like a strip of silk. I touched the photo, breathed deep. Beneath the metal, there's not only engine and gas. There's the promise I signed with myself, and I won't let anyone erase it again. Thursday morning, I was reviewing the Frankfurt report when an email from Riverside Pawn lit up. "A cash buyer is interested in the Mustang. First funds win." I called Ramirez immediately. He confirmed the buyer could complete within 2 days. "Your hold window is still open," he said, "but we can't refuse cash if you don't pay in full before the deadline." I looked at the countdown on the fridge: 16 days to the final due date. But the real race was only 48 hours. The HELOC still hung. I opened the tracker and typed 48-hour plan: verify cash on hand, call the credit union for same-day wire, sweep backup sources, seal leaks. I texted the family group: switch to emergency mode. Cash buyer appeared. Dad called first: "I can advance from my shift lead for $2,000. Next week's paycheck covers it." I thanked him and told him to label the transfer Mustang repayment. Mom texted after: "I sold Grandma's silver candlesticks. Low price but cash today." Crystal sent photos of a handbag and rarely used heels. "I'm taking them to consignment, asking for quick payout." I logged each item into the sheet. The committed column turned greener. At 10 a.m., I arrived at the credit union. The teller said, "We can process a wire before 11:45 a.m. I filled out the form, leaving the final amount blank. I texted Ramirez: "Keep the line open. I'll update each milestone." At noon, I swung by Lakewood. Dad handed over a photo of the advance transfer receipt. Mom set an empty velvet box in front of me. "These pieces have been with me through so many ceremonies," she said. "Now they'll bring your car home." I clipped the receipt into the black binder. No room for pretty words, only documents. My phone buzzed. Crystal said the consignment shop paid less because of scuffs. I asked, any faster option? She sighed, no. Then accept it. Today's cash matters more than tomorrow's price. For the first time, Crystal listened without looking for a workaround. At 1 p.m., an email from the credit union. The HELOC needed more house photos. Appraisal pushed to the weekend. 3 days was too far. I opened Plan B. Defer non-essentials. Use my emergency credit line. If still short, ask Uncle Marcus to bridge with terms bound as tightly as Dad's and Crystal's. I called Uncle. He said, okay. But put it in a separate contract. The language must have teeth. I said, I don't know how to write without teeth anymore. He gave a raspy laugh. Good. Without teeth, people will chew you. At 2 p.m., we were short exactly 3,000. I typed. Final gap. Caldwell texted. Don't let home pressure wreck Frankfurt. I replied, almost ashore. I messaged Crystal. Anything else you can sell today? She sent photos of silk scarves and fashion rings. The rings won't fetch much, she said. The red dress. I cut in, keep what you need for work. Sell the rest. Just before 3 p.m., Uncle Marcus reached the bank and wrote a check exactly per the template. I handed him a short pledge. Family loan, purpose. Redeem the Mustang, repay on schedule, penalty, if late. He read carefully, then signed. We snapped photos and saved them to the folder. I called the credit union. We're ready, the teller said. Say when and I'll hit the button. At 11:35 a.m., the bank's glass reflected faces tired but steady. Dad stood to my right. Mom on a plastic chair, Crystal clutching a paper bag, Uncle Marcus with arms folded. I looked at all of them and saw a family unlike our old version. Fewer empty promises, more real numbers. Begin, I said. The teller keyed the wire. I emailed Ramirez, wire in flight. The minute hand slid past the 40 mark. My hands were cold. Mom murmured a prayer. Dad watched the floor. Crystal gripped the bag until it wrinkled. I watched only the processing light. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Finally, the screen jumped. Completed. My phone buzzed. Ramirez, funds received. Status, paid in full on hold. We will not sell to the cash buyer. I exhaled as if easing the car down after a steep pass. We didn't cheer. I leaned against the cool glass, letting my body understand the narrow road we'd crossed. Mom touched my hand lightly. Thank you, she whispered. Dad said nothing, but stood straighter, like lifting a sandbag off his back. The night wind whipped the lot's windows, thin and cold. In my chest, the tight rope loosened, very slowly. That evening, I sent the confirmation email to schedule pickup. Ramirez replied, tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. I printed a checklist, originals, wire receipt, pre-pawn photos, VIN. I added a line. Stay silent when emotions want to break. Back at the apartment, I opened the tracker. The redemption funds column turned deep green. Alongside it, many squares were still yellow. Civil agreement, payment schedule, security installation. I marked day 0 for the new phase. Caldwell texted, Zoom at 11 a.m. tomorrow. Celebrate later. I replied, I'll celebrate when the engine fires. Before sleep, I stood by the window. Up above, I-25 flowed like a silver thread. The last 2 days felt like surgery without anesthesia. No haze, only sharp blades and stitches. I set a hand on my chest, hearing my heartbeat even out. Tomorrow I would touch the wheel again. But the more important thing happened today. We learned to run toward the same finish line, not away from one another. And for the first time, I believed the Mustang would return to the garage not by luck, but by discipline and numbers that stood on my side. The next morning, I arrived at Riverside Pawn and Loan earlier than the appointment. The opening hour air smelled of cleanser over metal. The fluorescent buzz rasped like a stretched nerve. Ramirez appeared right at 8:30 a.m. Neat shirt, the careful look of someone working on the seam between law and appetite. He set a file on the counter and handed me a pen. Sign where marked, then we'll deliver the car. I nodded, touching the pen like a latch newly oiled. I signed my name stroke by stroke, keeping my hand steady. It felt strange, like writing over the shadow of the forged signature that had haunted me for nights. Verify the VIN, Ramirez said, sliding over the printed alphanumerics. I matched them with the photos from before the car was taken. They matched. He rang a bell. A buzz-cut kid brought a key ring. The Mustang key lay in the middle, black and glossy, heavy like a sliver of memory cast in metal. We washed and charged it last night, Ramirez said. Policy, before return. I took the key, fingertips tingling from cold and emotion. We walked to the back lot. Under the awning, my fastback rested, the black paint catching the sun into a streak of steel. I touched the hood. The metal was cool and smooth like that first day at the dealer. Sorry for the inconvenience, Ramirez said quietly. I kept it short. I didn't want to open another door of conversation here. I turned the key. The first cough was rough, then evened out. I sat for a beat to let the sound pass through me. A rite of cleansing, shifted, rolled out. In the rear view, the neon pulled back and vanished. Triumph showed up with a bitter note, like coffee brewed too strong. The car was back, but the part I thought safest had been breached by familiar hands. I didn't cheer. I held the wheel and reminded myself, today is the midpoint, not the finish. Back in the garage under my building, I photographed all 4 corners, noted condition. I locked the papers in the safe and placed the spare key in a new spot. I scheduled an immobilizer and a steering lock, called the insurance to update the file. The rep asked, "Any change to where you park?" I said, "Yes. Now only I have the code and the key." Simple words, but they felt like setting a new mile marker. That afternoon, I took the Frankfurt Zoom. Caldwell caught the Mustang's reflection sliding past the window. "It's back?" he asked. I nodded. He said, "Keep the rhythm. When home is steady, we'll talk about growing your team." I thanked him, ended the call, and sat still. In my head, the sound of pen on paper clean and decisive replaced the tangled noise of the past weeks. 3 days later, Mom texted, "Sunday dinner, your father's grilling. Come?" I weighed it, then replied, "I'll come." I brought the black binder and a draft repayment agreement. I wanted to set an eraser beside the pen, so if anyone tried to rewrite, the ink would be fresh. The table was familiar, blue cloth, hand-painted dishes saved for rare occasions. The smells of barbecue, mashed potatoes, and butter made the kitchen warm enough to soften anyone. Dad set a plate before me, his wrist still streaked from night shifts. Crystal arrived late, hair tied back, neck bare. I spoke before the talk drifted to safe waters. "The car is back. Thank you for your parts. But we're not done." I opened the binder, slid the draft to the middle. "This is a civil agreement with interest and penalties. Without it, I file criminal charges." I didn't need to raise my voice. The words carried weight on their own. Dad looked at me longer than usual. "I'll sign," he said, "but let me read it. All." He read slowly, finger underlining a few lines. Mom folded her hands, didn't interrupt, sometimes glancing at Crystal as if to ask but not daring to. Crystal swallowed. "I'll sign," she said softly. "And I'll pay on time." I nodded. "If you need an extension, ask 7 days ahead. Everything in writing." We ate with a silence that fit. I gave a brief update on Frankfurt. Dad asked a couple of questions about interest rates. Mom said the neighbor switched electricity plans. Little stories drifted across the table like pebbles into a shallow pond, making ripples that softened the surface instead of straining it. After dinner, Mom pulled me to the sink. "If you're angry at me, say it," she said. "I can take it." I answered, "I don't need anger to hold a boundary." She paused, then nodded, eyes shining but dry. I saw a new habit growing in her, asking before touching. I passed the garage. Dad flipped the light, pointing to the newly organized tool rack. I'm planning a locked partition, he said. Only you know the code, when you want it. I looked at the car, sitting quiet, its body reflecting four still figures. I thanked him, keeping my voice low so I wouldn't crack what we'd just reached. Before leaving, I gathered the marked-up draft. Dad said, "We'll sign Thursday with Uncle Marcus and the lawyer." I agreed. Crystal slipped a small note into my pocket, a week-by-week plan, modest amounts, but steady. "I'll send it every Sunday night," she said. "Short or full, I'll report," I said. "On-time reports get you halfway there." That night, I drove the Mustang along Sloan's Lake. The city breathed evenly. Wind slipped through the window, the engine's low hum like a whisper about patience. I thought about the sprint, about squares turning green. Victory tastes bitter, yes, bitterness keeps you alert. If it were sweet, I might have lazily believed things would heal on their own. Back at the apartment, I locked the car and rested my hand on the wheel. "You're home," I murmured, like soothing a child past a fever. In the mirror, I was no longer the woman who aims to please, but the steward of an asset called respect. I cut the engine and heard the click like a period ending a long sentence. Tomorrow would be the last formalities. Signatures, interest lines, due dates. But tonight, I let myself stand another minute in the quiet and the hint of gas, to remember some things return only when you grip the wheel firmly, clearly, as if you never let go. The next Thursday morning, I stepped into Dana Brooks's office with the black binder. The glass door reflected a less dreamy version of me, straight-backed, clear-eyed, hand-holding the fountain pen Grandpa once gave me. Dana stood and shook my hand. Fresh roast coffee drifted through the room. "Tell me from the beginning, but leave your feelings at the door," she said. I laid down the wire receipt, the paid in full on hold confirmation, title photos, printed emails from Ramirez, and the Frankfurt timeline, everything sliding across the desk like cards in perfect order. Dana turned each page, brown ink pen tracking with a sharp gaze. "We have two roads," she summed up. "Criminal, forged signature, unauthorized use of property. Civil, repayment agreement with teeth, interest, penalties, enforcement, both valid. The difference is emotional cost and time." I looked at the window where sunlight skimmed the blue trim, then took a breath. "I want the law on my side, but I don't want to destroy my family. Civil, on the condition everything is tightly bound." One late autumn afternoon, I sat in my apartment. Sunlight slanting through the window, spreading gold over the wooden table where the black file folder used to sit. Now it rested neatly in the drawer, no longer a symbol of fear but proof that I had gone through the storm and kept control of the wheel of my own life. The Mustang was still in the garage, polished and gleaming, but I understood clearly. The car was no longer the destination, only the evidence of a legacy I was writing with each action, each boundary, each timely no. I thought of my parents, of the small but real changes, the question before borrowing, the waiting eyes seeking consent, the considerate silence when I needed space. I thought of Crystal, the steady receipts, and her simple smile when she showed me a budget sheet no longer in deficit. I thought of myself, a Vanessa who no longer strained to be the good daughter, but a grown woman strong enough to love without losing herself. At times, sadness swept over me when I remembered past years. How many times I missed the chance to enjoy, how often I denied myself little joys just to prove I was worthy. But now I understood. Legacy doesn't lie in how much we endure, it lies in how we learn to stand tall, lay down the rules, and guard our own dreams. That legacy isn't meant to be carved on a gravestone, but etched into every relationship, every lesson I leave behind for the next generation. That family only lasts when responsibility stands alongside love. Over the past year, I met many young women in my community finance class. They sat on plastic chairs, pens trembling in their hands, asking me, "How do I say no to my family?" I told them my story, hiding none of the bitterness, but never covering up the light. I let them touch the Mustang so they would understand that a dream can be taken away, but it can also be won back if you know how to hold your boundaries tight. I saw their eyes brighten, and I knew, this is the legacy I am leaving behind, not the car, but the belief that self-respect can be learned and boundaries can be built at any time. Sometimes, while driving along winding mountain roads, I remembered what my grandfather once said: metal and paint are only the shell, inside is the promise you sign with yourself. I whispered back, Grandpa, I've signed that promise again, this time with a signature no one can forge. The road ahead stretched wide, no longer debt, but choices I was free to make. And at this moment, I also want to send a message to those listening to my story. Maybe you've had part of your dream taken away. Maybe you've been used by your own family. Maybe you've felt small in front of louder voices. But please remember, the truth only begins to change when you dare to stand up and lay the rules on the table. Respect is not a gift someone hands you, it is something you force others to recognize through your actions. I lost a car for a time, but I found something greater: faith in myself. The Mustang in the garage is visible proof. The real legacy I leave behind is the steadiness in my heart and the boundaries no one can erase. I close my story here, but the journey continues on mountain roads, in small classrooms, in family dinners, where everyone now asks before touching each other's things. And if there is one thing I want to remind you, it is this: never let your dream be treated as something pawnable. Hold it firmly in your hands and believe you are worthy. Finally, I want to send a heartfelt thank you to those who have patiently stayed with me through this long road. Thank you for walking alongside me, for listening to both the bitter knots and the hopeful turns. If you have lived through something similar, I would truly love to hear your story in the comments. And if this story has touched you, please like, subscribe, and join me for the journeys ahead. Your support is what gives me the strength to keep telling, to keep writing, and to keep turning wounds into lessons. I treasure every minute you've given me, and I look forward to meeting you again on the road ahead, where together we will keep finding strength in our own stories.